I'm Emily Long. I am the Area 2 Cultural Resource Specialist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And today I'm going to be talking just a little bit about a couple of the education things that myself and my colleagues have been developing. So a lot of the times my colleagues and I were asked by our planners, so the people who do soil conservation, range management, whatnot, as well as our producers, the people who are getting the contracts, like, what is a cultural resource? Why are these things significant? And they want to say, like, it clearly can't be significant. We're like, no, this gross old can is definitely significant for, many reasons, although sometimes it's hard to really explain why some historic trash we think is fantastic, but they don't. They ask, why do we have to do a cultural survey to begin with? Will I still be able to do this project even though there are cultural resources there? And we want a lot of transparency between us and our planners so that they tell us immediately if there are cultural resources. There's a lot of concerns from the producers that, will the government be able to take my land if there are cultural resources on my property? And of course, then why should I care is a big one with our planners and our producers. And that's been a difficult thing for us to confront and trying to answer to people's satisfaction and trying to find ways that how can we give this information in kind of a nice, neat way. And last year, a planner reached out asking for more cultural resource brochures. And we're like, what cultural resource brochures? I didn't even know there was one. And there was one created in 1998. It focused on the Four Corners area and kind of gave the landowners responsibilities and NRCS responsibilities. Well, I wasn't aware of it. It was very outdated, and it really pushed myself and my colleagues to create an entirely new brochure to answer a lot of these questions and try to help both our planners and our producers by giving them something that they can print out and just immediately put on their desk. They can give directly to the producers so that they would be able to answer these questions and hopefully give the NRCS responsibilities as well as the landowner responsibilities. And on top of that, what are cultural resources and why do they matter? So we developed the brochure. It's this handy dandy brochure. We're getting it professionally printed eventually, but right now we have it available to all of our producers so that they can print it off themselves. I also have been printing off a bunch of them and mailing them to our offices. And so hopefully this brochure, it breaks down the information that in a way that helps for understanding and creates a lot of, again, transparency and just clarity for why we do, the cultural resource specialists, why we do what we do, and then the responsibilities of NRCS and the responsibilities of the landowners. And so that it's right there in front of them and that we can prevent potential inadvertent discoveries. We can hopefully prevent destruction of cultural resources on accident, those types of things. And so my colleagues provided a lot of wonderful images for the brochure and used a bunch of the information from the previous brochure, but tried to clean it up a little bit and make it very clear what are NRCS policies and why we recognize as an agency that cultural resources are important, what we need to do on our end for cultural resources in terms of identifying, recording, and so forth. And then on top of that, landowner responsibility. I know I keep hitting home with that, but we have to keep telling our landowners, like, you have a part in this as well, and that we can terminate contracts should they do anything to advertently destroy cultural resources. And then just it provides national policy as well. So it's just trying to get all that information right out there. On top of that, on the other side of the brochure, trying to have something a little bit further in terms of, like, what is a cultural resource and very clear imagery on what that can be. Because there's the misconception with a lot of our planners and producers that a cultural resource is only something prehistoric, or some of the things they see, those cans from the 1950s and 60s with the church key openings, all the way to the older ring pop tabs and whatnot. it's assumed that those couldn't possibly be a culture resource. Like, nope, you got to let us know about those too, along with collapsed barns and foundations and whatnot. We also try to show what is a brief history of Colorado in a very short few paragraphs, trying to show what could be the breadth of Colorado history and trying to go back as early as possible, but also trying to show like things not that old that to us, you know, are still a cultural resource. So hopefully this is still very new for a lot of our people. And so still trying to stress the point of giving this to our producers, and that hopefully this will answer some of the questions that really bother our planners and producers. So it's a start, and I'm hoping it'll make positive change. And like I said, this is available online for our planners and producers. If you are interested in a copy, just let me know. I'd be happy to send you one. And we're getting it professionally printed so that we can have it sent out to all of our county offices throughout the state. And then after this brochure was created, I started wondering, like, what can we do to reach out to kids more in terms of cultural resources? And the NRCS already has a really great program for soil conservation, climate change, and whatnot online, and as well as at county and state fairs. And so they love this worm. You can see the worm on the screen there, and there are lesson plans for teachers, things to print off for kids. And then there's this great soil tunnel that's put up at the county and state fairs, and kids can do scavenger hunts. They'll tape stuff in the soil tunnel and whatnot. And I started talking to the planners, and I said, well, if you put up this soil tunnel, could we put cultural resource stuff in there? Like, oh, wow, that'd be fun. And they provide a lot of materials at the NRCS table as well with this soil tunnel. So started talking with the planners and also with our public relations person, and found out we really don't have any cultural resource materials for kids. And so trying to figure out what that could be was a lot of fun with my colleagues, our public relations person, and then doing a lot of research with the for what the Forest Service, BLM, National Park Service, what they have posted online for activity booklets. So what's something that would be relatively inexpensive to print, and each office could do this as well. What's something we could have professionally printed? What's something we could put out in the county offices as well as the county and state fairs? Could it be something we put online for families to print? All of this became considered. So recently finished, you can see the date, January 2021, recently finished the NRCS activity booklet, roughly for ages 6 through 12, so a range of activities in there for kids to try. So different ages, like in terms of matching prehistoric structures with the type, storytelling through artifacts, word searches, drawing, there's coloring and whatnot. Also try to break up the booklet, and this is how it looks printed out. Break it up by what is the NRCS, what does the NRCS do with archaeology, prehistoric Colorado, historic Colorado, and kind of what can you do as a steward of history in the past and whatnot. So trying to break it up into these type of messages so that it gives the idea of not only just, hey, isn't archaeology cool, but what we do as an agency with the NRCS, all the way to how can you be a good steward of the past. And we're getting these professionally printed as well. And I'm hoping eventually we can have this online so it can be available just on the NRCS website to anybody. And so here's just another example, got word scrambles. You know, we have so many ditches in Colorado, had to have a section on historic ditches. And so got a little maze in there as well. You know, get traced from the river to the farm. So stuff like that as well. And from all this, trying to hope to develop more in the future with these kinds of materials. And we'll see, hopefully, that these are successful once we can start having big gatherings again at state and county fairs. We can see how these do in the offices throughout the state and kind of go from there. And so what's next? Don't know. I mean, it would be great if, and if you have any suggestions on what the NRCS can do, we would love to hear them. We're thinking about posters next that kind of highlight different kinds of cultural resources in Colorado, how to do the Section 106 process. So those would be specifically for the offices and whatnot. So that's kind of where we're heading next. I would love suggestions. I would love input. If you have ideas on how to improve what we've created, ideas